Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. The Taliban says Afghanistan is a free and sovereign nation as it celebrates the exit of U.S. troops after 20 years of occupation, describing their departure as a historic moment. Taliban fighters have taken charge of Kabul's airport as the last U.S. soldiers flew out of the country. Celebratory gunfire and fireworks lit up the Kabul night sky as they left. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird, reports.
The United States military troops have completely evacuated from Afghanistan, but leaving behind a couple hundred American civilians.
Every single U.S. service member is now out of Afghanistan. I can say that with 100% certainty. There's a lot of heartbreak associated with this departure. We did not get everybody out that we wanted to get out. But I think if we'd stayed another 10 days, Louis, we wouldn't have gotten everybody out that we wanted to get out.
The U.S. stands firm by its decision to end a 20-year war, the longest U.S. war.
The United States and our allies began our evacuation and relocation operation in Kabul. As you just heard from the Pentagon, a few hours ago, that operation was completed. More than 123,000 people have been safely flown out of Afghanistan. That includes about 6,000 American citizens. The Taliban has made a commitment to prevent terrorist groups from using Afghanistan as a base for external operations that could threaten the United States or our allies, including Al-Qaeda and the Taliban's sworn enemy, ISIS-K. Here, too, we will hold them accountable to that commitment. But while we have expectations of the Taliban, that doesn't mean we will rely on the Taliban. We'll remain vigilant in monitoring threats ourselves, and we'll maintain robust counterterrorism capabilities in the region to neutralize those threats if necessary, as we demonstrated in the past few days by striking ISIS facilitators and imminent threats in Afghanistan.
The U.S. is less than 2 weeks away from the 20th anniversary of 9/11, a day that the U.S. vowed to eliminate terrorist threats and support democracy. The end of this U.S. mission comes with mixed emotions by some Americans. From Washington, Maria Bird, Channel Television News.
The VOA's national security correspondent, Jeff Selden, joins us now for more on this. Jeff, the U.S.'s longest war is finally over. Despite the chaotic exit, what reactions is this getting in the country?
There are a range of reactions, and a lot of it is in some ways very political. There are Americans who are glad that the U.S. war, after nearly 2 decades, has finally come to an end and that U.S. troops are out of Afghanistan. There are others who are very angry at the way the war ended and the way that the evacuation took place, saying that the Biden administration has not handled it as well as it should have, and it should have been smoother, that there should not have been any Afghans or even Americans left behind. And U.S. officials have said, as of right now, there are a little over 100 Americans in Afghanistan who still want to come out. So there are a range of emotions. Even some of the families who met with President Biden in the last couple of days, the families of these soldiers who were killed in the suicide attack at Kabul airport last week, expressed a range of emotions about meeting the president, anger at the president over the loss of their loved ones in that attack, and at the way the situation is handled. So the emotions have really run the gamut. And the question is going to be, going forward, how does the president handle it, and how does the U.S. military and the U.S. national security apparatus handle the threats coming from the region?
Yeah, Jeff, speaking of that attack last week, and as the 9/11 remembrance approaches, what guarantee has the Biden administration voiced to Americans to ensure that the Taliban will keep its promise not to let any attack against the West foster in Afghanistan?
Well, as you just heard the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, say, the U.S. is not taking the Taliban's word for it. They're going to try to hold them accountable. They're going to try to make sure the Taliban live up to their commitments. But there is tremendous doubt that the Taliban are willing and or capable of doing that. One of the big concerns that the Pentagon has voiced in recent days is that in the way that the Taliban took over the country, emptied out all of the Afghan prisons, it has strengthened Islamic State Khorasan, the Islamic State's Afghan affiliate, which carried out the attack, the suicide attack on the airport and launched rockets just the other day at the airport. So there is concern about that. There is ongoing concern from intelligence officials, both in the U.S. and across the Western world, about the intent of the Taliban or the willingness of the Taliban to truly break ties with al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda's affiliate and not allow them to rebuild. Indications are that they have not severed their ties with al-Qaeda, and that al-Qaeda leadership, both from the core group and from their al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent affiliate, which is active in Afghanistan, are truly intertwined, interwoven, part of the Taliban military command and hierarchy. And so there are concerns going forward, but the Pentagon says, despite all of this, that they have robust over-the-horizon capabilities with U.S. planes, U.S. drones, and they say the strikes that they carried out in the last couple of days have shown that should there be a threat, the U.S. and the military is ready and capable of reacting and taking it out.
And Jeff, just before I let you go, what has the U.S. said regarding reports that a U.S. drone strike on a suspected suicide bomber in Afghanistan killed a number of civilians, including 6 children and a man who worked as a translator for U.S. forces?
The U.S. is saying 2 things, and specifically military officials are saying that they are confident that they hit a legitimate target and took out a threat. The Pentagon has also said, though, that it is not in position to dispute the accounts that civilians were also killed in that drone strike. And Pentagon officials expressed general regret that any civilians are killed at any point, saying that they work very, very hard at the Pentagon, that military commanders are very, very careful and do more, they say, than any other country in the world to make sure civilians are not hit, are not struck when the U.S. carries out these counterterrorism strikes. The investigation, though, is ongoing.
All right, then we'll have to wait and see. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Anytime.
Meanwhile, the Taliban spokesman has called for national unity following the withdrawal of the final U.S. troops from Afghanistan after 20 years. He urged Afghans to transcend differences and come together, saying that the international community would not support the country if its people were not united. The spokesman says the forthcoming government would represent all of the Afghan people. He noted the issues in the country's economy and called on other countries to invest in Afghanistan. Afghan refugees in India have staged a sit-in protest outside the United Nations Refugee Agency office, calling for refugee cards and resettlement options to a third country, as well as more security. Many are also concerned about those who were left behind in the war-torn country and say Taliban fighters will spread terror and impose strict restrictions on Afghans, especially women. The Taliban entered Kabul on August the 15th after rapidly taking over much of the country, prompting chaotic scenes at the airport as crowds scrambled to escape.
And I want to tell something for the UN. Please hear the voice of Afghans. Afghans are, it is more than 40 years that Afghans are just suffering with these problems, every kind of problem. They have economic problems, they have society problems, also they have every kind of problems are in Afghanistan. I want to tell just for UN that please hear the voice of Afghanistan. They are also humans. If you're talking from the humanity, please listen to Afghans' voice.
And our EU countries have offered to step up humanitarian aid to Afghanistan and assistance to neighboring countries. The bloc's top migration official has called for EU members to adopt a comprehensive approach to the unfolding situation in the Central Asian country. Germany says prompt action is necessary in order to avoid a repeat of 2015, when more than 1 million people from the Middle East and Africa arrived in the EU, many crossing the Mediterranean on unsafe vessels. The bloc has fortified its external borders and increased assistance to countries including Turkey, Lebanon, Libya and Tunisia in a bid to keep people away from its own soil.
We are in a situation, of course, where we need a comprehensive approach towards Afghanistan. We need to avoid a humanitarian crisis. We need to avoid a migratory crisis. And we need to avoid security threats. And this is what we need to discuss today.
And what is the most important thing now? The most important thing now is to send the right message into the region. Stay there, and we will support the region to help the people there.
Let's check in on the COVID-19 pandemic now. Experts in South Africa are testing a new coronavirus variant to determine if it poses a threat. Plus, officials in Germany say the infection rate has fallen for the first time since early June in the country. Here's our COVID-19 global update.
Scientists in South Africa are monitoring a new coronavirus variant that has been slowly spreading through the country. The variant, known as C12, was first identified in May and has not yet spread enough to qualify as a variant of concern. However, scientists have observed that C12 appears to mutate almost twice as fast as other global variants.
Exact threat from this variant we don't really know yet. We're not at the stage of fully understanding that. The reason we were worried about the kind of combination of mutations was that many of the mutations we see in this C.1.2 are the same mutations we've seen in some of the other variants of concern, particularly the beta and the alpha and the gamma, but it's in a different combination.
The variant has been detected in each of South Africa's 9 provinces as well as in several other countries, including the United Kingdom, New Zealand and China. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the country will receive 500,000 doses of BioNTech Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine from Singapore later this week. The deal is part of a straight swap arrangement that will see Australia return the favour in the same amount of doses later this year, but will allow the country to accelerate a flagging vaccination program amid a surge in cases. Also in Australia, Canberra has extended its strict lockdown by a further 2 weeks as the capital city struggles to contain a spread of the highly infectious Delta variant. In neighbouring New Zealand, the country has seen a drop in cases for the second day in a row, with 49 new infections reported amid the tight lockdown the country undertook during the latest outbreak this month.
And what we've seen is those unlinked cases actually over time have reduced as, in some cases, new cases when they emerge become the piece in the puzzle that's required to be able to connect the dots. But as we go on, we are keeping a very close eye on those unlinked because that will tell us whether or not we have potentially chains of transmission that could lead to additional cases in the community. And those are the numbers we need to bring right down.
Around 1.7 million people in the city of Auckland will remain in strict level 4 lockdown for another 2 weeks, while restrictions from the remainder of the country will ease slightly from Wednesday. In Germany, the nationwide 7-day incidence rate has dropped slightly. It is the first time it has fallen in more than a month and now stands at 74.8 new infections per 100,000 people over a period of 7 days. And finally, the European Commission says that 70% of the European Union's adult population have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, hitting the target it had set at the beginning of the year. The announcement marks an important milestone in the EU's vaccination strategy after a slow start, but it also masks big differences among EU countries, with some nations being well above the 70% goal, while others in the poorer eastern region of the bloc are far behind.
Haiti's former First Lady has called on the international community to help the country track down those responsible for gunning down her husband, President Ohno, in a late night raid by suspected mercenaries at the couple's home in July. Moise's assassination plunged the nation, already plagued by hunger and gang violence, further into chaos, triggering a manhunt for the masterminds across the Americas. A devastating earthquake a month later has further hobbled its government. Martin Moise says while Haitian authorities have made some advances, she fears progress has slowed.
Hope that my husband will find justice. Every country that can help, please help, because the people that did that are still out there. And I don't know if their name will ever be out. But at some point, if they find the people that send the money, the people that financially help, I think that they will find the people that give the order. So I will have hope that Jovenel Moise will have justice, and I won't stop asking for justice until justice is found.
Now, residents and tourists in communities near Lake Tahoe fled as a fierce 2-week-old wildfire brought closer to the popular resort destination overnight. Evacuations in and around the town of South Lake Tahoe came as the U.S. Forest Services said it was taking the unusual step of closing all 18 national forests in California to the public in the midst of a fire season already shaping as one of the worst on record. The closure is due to last 17 days starting Wednesday and effectively extends a shutdown of 9 national forests in Northern California that began on August the 23rd and was due to expire over the upcoming Labor Day holiday weekend. More than 6,800 wildfires have blackened an estimated 1.7 million acres within California alone this season, much of it on Forest Service property, putting 2021 on pace to surpass last year's record amount of landscape consumed by flames. The so-called Cowder Blaze has emerged as one of the most destructive this summer, spreading across more than 177,000 acres since August the 14th, with firefighters managing to carve containment lines around just 14% of its perimeter. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry has held talks in Tokyo with Japan's Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga and other ministers on cooperation on carbon emissions and cutting support for fossil fuels ahead of a trip to China. The former Secretary of State has led U.S. efforts to convince the global community of the threat of climate change and urged the acceleration of efforts to curb carbon emissions. The U.S. push comes in advance of the UN COP26 climate conference, which will be held in Scotland later this year. China, the United States and Japan are the world's biggest, second and fifth biggest carbon emitter.
Japan made some tough decisions. Japan has set a goal of 46 to 50% reduction in emissions in the next 10 years and to get on a path to net zero by 2050. So I wanted to consult with you. I'm going to China tonight. I wanted to hear your thoughts about the global situation, everything that we need to do in order to get on track for Glasgow.
And now thinking out of the box and also saving the environment. Over the past decade, Japanese artist Monami Ohno has used the unusual medium of cardboard to create artwork inspired by popular culture, from anime robots to a life-sized gun and fighter jets. Her intricate sculptures have since gained popularity, with her work exhibited in galleries in Japan and overseas. Take a look.
10 years ago, 19-year-old art student Monami Ohno picked up a cardboard box for a homework assignment and made what she described was a bike-like thing.
When I first tried folding the paper, gluing them and putting them together, the people around me praised me, saying things like, "Wow, you can make this," and that made me so happy.
Since then, she's made over 200 detailed sculptures entirely out of cardboard and glue. Her imaginative, almost lifelike cardboard sculptures have gradually gained a following in recent years. The subject matter of most Ohno's work can usually be found in popular culture, ranging from giant robots from popular Japanese animation films to small-scale model kit-like renditions of tanks and fighter jets. In Ohno's words, she selects her subjects based on what she would like to see displayed in her own home.
I basically only make things that I like. For example, I make the things that I would really like to decorate my house with, so I have a preference in mind.
Rather than relying on precise blueprints, Ohno simply draws a rough sketch on the cardboard to get an idea of the measurements before cutting out the design and molding it using glue and sometimes a little water. Her work has been displayed in galleries at home, in Japan and overseas, but most of it isn't for sale. Instead, Ohno often relies on custom sculptures that she is commissioned to produce as a source of income. Ohno's commissioned pieces have sold for $1,000 to $13,000 US.
Brilliant stuff, nice stuff, and also saving the environment. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shuboale. Bye for now.